Special Investigating Unit, and gosh, haven't they been busy. It says it's won a court order that will freeze around 40 million rands worth of assets controlled by individuals and companies who made money through the Gauteng school sanitation scandal. It emerged earlier this year. The Gauteng provincial government had spent over 400 million rand on sanitizing schools. No one was using the schools because this was during the hard lockdown last year. This has led to calls for action to be taken against the Gauteng MEC, Panyaza Lesufi, because of the waste of money. Well, let's speak now to the SIU. Their spokesperson is Kaiser Khanyago. Kaiser, good afternoon to you. What order have you been granted here?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to your viewers. We went to the special tribunal to look for an order to freeze money that are in the accounts of some of the people that were part of this contract of 431 million for disinfecting schools in Gauteng. And among those issues, it was money that was in people's bank accounts, plus some of the properties that they were owning. For an example, there were cars and some of the properties that they were owning, and we then really freezed all of them. We got a preservation order to freeze those accounts and so on.
What kind of cars are we looking at here? And I mean, where I'm going with this is you'll know some of the cars that I know you've had preservation orders against in the past were quite flashy.
Yeah, in this particular one, it's flashy, but not that flashy. We're talking here about the Mercedes-Benz, V-Class, the Range Rovers, Haval, Toyota Avanza, and many other things that the people bought with this money, because it was just a windfall of money coming out of the department without following processes.
So what evidence have you gathered around these companies? I mean, what were they actually doing? Were they just getting government money and not actually providing a service?
That is one part. The big issue is what happened in the department. The department applied to Treasury and asked for them to be given a deviation, so because of the emergency of this matter. And then the deviation came to them, and the deviation said you must appoint companies that are accredited and those that are on the CSD database. And then they never did anything of that sort. They went ahead and hired people who are not in the CSD, who are not even accredited to do the work. For example, out of 280 companies, 173 of them were not accredited and they were not on CSD. We have since uncovered that people would just send WhatsApp messages of their companies and they were given the contracts as they are. And that in itself made the whole process to be irregular and unlawful. But what is also fascinating, one of the key tenets of the procurement process is everything must be cost effective. But in this particular instance, it was just categories. They would just say, if the school is a primary school, we'll pay you between 250,000 and 270,000. If it's a secondary school, 250 to 290. If it's a district office, 250 to 300,000. Regardless of whether that school has got one class or 5 classes or 20 classes. And that in itself, it means those figures were not bearing any relation to the work done by the service provider or the cost of the material that was used, because they should have used square meterage to say, when we are contaminating so many squares, you'll be paid this per square meter.
And I mean, this was during the hard lockdown. No one was going to school. They didn't need to be cleaned in the first place.
Yeah, that is another issue that is there, where we're looking into it. I must hasten to say that the investigations are still going on, because as you might have seen, 40 million rand is just less than 10% of the total that was spent. Therefore, we still have to get to the bottom of this, but we also have to go to the bottom of all the officials in the supply chain and everywhere else, from the lowest to the highest, on the responsibility that they have on this, because 431 million is not little money.
No, well, I mean, it's a ton of money. Do we know if any of these companies were linked to politicians? You talk about WhatsApp messages. I mean, were these tenders being, what's the phrase, distributed?
No, we have not as yet reached those outcomes, but like we always say, when we reach this outcome and there's evidence of criminality that comes, where there is clear corruption, because corruption is a criminal offense, we will then refer those ones to the National Prosecuting Authority. Our first prize was to make sure that the monies that has been used unfairly must be returned, and then from there We then go to the next one, which is the issue of referrals around officials, and then where we find criminality, send it where it's supposed to go.
Kaiser Khanyako, spokesperson for the Special Investigating Unit, really do appreciate the time. Thanks very much indeed.